So, good morning or good afternoon, depending of where we are, or where you are today, in Europe or elsewhere or in America. So it's a great pleasure today to open the first webinar of 2022 of the Research Chair in Security and Integrity in Sport. I'm Sylvie Parra. I'm responsible of the research chair, and today I will be helped by Elisabeth Saint-Pierre, who is, you can maybe have your hand up. So Elisabeth is a PhD student with me, and she will do the question and answer period for today's webinar. So it is a great pleasure today to welcome Dr. Jeannine Ohlert from the University of Cologne, Germany. And before introducing her more deeply, I would like to share with you some technical points for today, as usual, like we do always. So our guest today will have about 1 hour to present. And after, there is a period of questions for about 20-25 minutes. So we suggest you to ask your question via the chat during the webinar. So Elisabeth will take the question on the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we will ask your question to Jeannine, or you can also use the hand icon of the Zoom to ask a question directly and by opening your camera. So there is no problem there also. And feel free to interact verbally by opening your camera in this period of question. Now, Dr. Jeannine Ohlert, I can present her a little bit because it's very important to introduce her greatly. She's a psychologist and researcher at the Department of Health Science and Social Psychology at University of Cologne, Germany. Her present research focuses on interpersonal violence and on empowering motivational climate as protective factor. Today, she will share her thoughts about the concept of empowering climate in sport, the links with interpersonal violence, and she will present an intervention program for coaches that focus on inducing an empowering climate. So I leave the floor to Dr. Ohlert.
Hope this will work again. So I hope you can now all see my presentation. Okay, so everything should be fine right now. Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to be able to present. Yeah, first of all, some of our latest research results to you, and then also some ideas about how to transfer these research results directly into practice. Yeah, and I would like to start my presentation with a short glimpse into my starting point. So my starting point really is the idea that today, when we look at the current coaching culture in sport, there are some examples that make us think about how is it done and how should it be done in a way. And what we are seeing at the moment, I mean, I think most of you might have seen the documentation Athlete A about sexual abuse in gymnastics. But interestingly, when that series went online, people started talking not only about the sexual abuse that happened there, but about the whole culture of coaching in gymnastics. And also we have a very recent example, actually very recent example from the Olympic Games, where young figure skater Kamila Valieva was accused of doping during the competition several days ago. And interestingly, in Germany, I couldn't find a quote in the English news feed, but in Germany, there's this whole thing started a discussion again about the culture of coaching in elite sport, because I mean, she's very young and she's not, we are all sure she's not the one who decided she wants to dope. But it's somehow part of the culture. And the question, she's 15, should she already be able to compete at the Olympic Games? And there are some voices have raised that say, no, we should raise the starting age to 18 years. But you see, it's still, we have, I would say we have a problem with the coaching culture in at least some sports. And yeah, when I talk to coaches about that problem, and I'm also doing studies with the German Gymnastics Federation, and they had some cases as well where gymnasts went to the press and said, okay, I'm not working with this coach anymore because that the culture that's happening there, that's not good and that's not fair for us, and I want to work with a different coach. So we had some issues in Germany as well. And yeah, when you start talking to the coaches, they will tell you it's necessary. It's necessary to do this kind of coaching in order to be successful. Yeah. But when you look at this, what's happening is that you see that people are suffering from that. And we have an example. This is a very harsh example, I know, but it's a sample from last year where a South Korean athlete, a triathlete, female triathlete, she killed herself. And she left a letter after killing herself that the reason for killing herself was that she was suffering from verbal abuse and harassment of her coach and of her other team members. And that was the point where I was asking myself, I mean, how, yeah, for what is it worth if we are coaching like this, and what are we doing to the people? So, and what's happening is that people start to think about it right now. And this is what I think it's not new, that topic, but right now people start to think about it. And I found an article in the New York Times magazine from last May about a gymnast who asked, yeah, what if everything we know about gymnastics is wrong? What if everything we know about coaching in gymnastics, especially, and this perhaps I recommend this article because it's about a young woman who says, okay, I'm done with the whole old-fashioned coaching stuff, and I want to, I want to go my own way and train my own way, and I would add to this, not only in gymnastics, what if everything we thought to know about coaching in LS sport is wrong? And when you look at that question from a scientific point of view, there are already some ideas when you really just look into the performance motivation of athletes. So how can I try to motivate athletes to perform their best all the time? Because that's what the coaches want. And they tell me, okay, I have to yell at them, I have to be mean to them in order to make them perform well. But I'm not sure if this is true. And I would like to present you some ideas from research that might give us a different idea. There are some theories that I'm relying on. The first one is the so-called achievement goal theory, AGT. And as you can see, this is not a new theory. It's about 30, 40 years old. The basic idea of this theory is that it says that people have different mindsets when they want to achieve something. So they have different achievement goal orientations. That's how they call it. That's why it's called achievement goal theory. And they say that's a kind of personality trait. So you will have athletes that are very ego-oriented. They have ego goals. So they want to show superior abilities compared to other athletes. They have a very external focus of competence. So they are always looking for comparisons. They are always looking for competitions, and they want to be the best. And they always go for winning. They want to win. If they lose, that's horrible for them. So they always go for winning. They want to be better than others. If you ask these people, they will say, okay, if I have to put in some effort, that's already a sign of weakness. So the best thing is to win and not to put in any effort. Then I feel best. If I have to put in effort in order to win, that's not so good. And if I lose, that's worst. So that's really a problem then. So for these people, they would just apply just enough effort to outperform the others, not more. And they also have a problem with goal setting and making mistakes, because they will say that mistakes are really a disaster for them. They can't make mistakes. And what's happening then is that their goal setting is really unrealistic. That's a very extreme point. And of course, not very many people will be exactly like that. Yeah, but it's like on a scale between this extreme point and we have the task orientation on the other hand. So most people will be in between, but I will present you the other side of the of this dimension, so you can see what I mean. Because the other idea is that these are persons that are very task oriented, so they go for mastery goals. they have a focus on personal development. So developing themselves, not looking so much what the others are doing. So they want to enhance their performance all the time. So they are self-oriented in their focus of competence. They have their personal standards and self-referred criteria for evaluation. So they are really looking, how can I develop? How can I improve myself? And that's more important to them than winning or losing. Yeah, and also comparison with the others. It's not so important for these people. And they will see effort as a sign of strength. So if I put in more effort, they know they will develop and they will perform better. So effort is good. And also mistakes are not that bad, because they will see mistakes as a sign of learning. So if I can't do something at the first try, I will perhaps be able to do it at the second or third or perhaps 10th try. So it's important to make mistakes in order to learn. And with these people, you will see realistic goal setting. And as I said, these are two extremes, and you will, it's of course that not one person will be that extreme in one or the other direction. So every person is more or less ego-oriented or task-oriented. So if you think about yourself, you will find perhaps yourself more on the one hand of the scale or one on the other side of the scale. So the challenges we have with these two kinds of people, or different kinds of people, is that highly ego-oriented athletes, they are very vulnerable when it comes to motivational crisis. So if they are not the best in the group, they have a problem, because they want to be the best. And if they're not the best, they are not motivated anymore. For task-oriented people, it's easier because they experience more pleasure and show greater development in the long term. And that's why highly ego-oriented athletes are more likely to quit. They drop out of the sport if they are not the best in their group anymore. First, perhaps they switch the clubs so they can have another group where they can be the best. But after a while, when this is not working, they drop out. And the other issue is, if you look at sport and the sport system, that sport coaching is also mostly ego-oriented. It's about comparison all the times. And that's why athletes are used to compare each other and to assess their performance, or to rate their performance based on norms and rankings and not self-referred. And that's a problem. And what we see is that we have the highest level of ego orientation in young males. So adolescent males, or even younger. So for females, that's easier not to compare too much. But again, it's part of the sport. So the question is, what can we do about this? If we have these ego-oriented athletes, how can we perhaps influence them in order that to motivate them in the long term? And that's what the achievement goal theory says. We can indeed influence others, and we can create a climate that helps them with their motivation, and they call it motivational climate. So they say that the authors say that the social environment is also important for the achievement goal orientation that I have. So we, around the young people, we can influence their goal orientation. So, and they call it the motivational climate. And that means that the achievement goal orientations and performance orientation atmosphere that we create in a certain social environment. So in a sport group. So it's several people who can influence this motivational climate. And of course, the parents, and of course, the peers, but most important are the coaches, as we see. And then they say, okay, when we have the two types of ego orientation, we can also have like two types of motivational climate by the coach. We can have an ego-oriented motivational climate. And an ego-oriented motivational climate means that one person, me as a coach, has all the power. That's people who are using an ego-oriented motivational climate, they will have a controlling coaching style. So other opinions are not allowed in this coaching style. They will punish for mistakes or threaten with punishment so in order to make people or to let people be afraid, so they will not make any mistakes anymore, hopefully. So these coaches are yelling or ignoring after bad performances. Yeah, typical for an ego-oriented motivational climate is a way of treating athletes unequal. So they focus only on the best athletes and not taking care of the others in the group. And they are also enforcing hierarchies within the group of athletes. So we have some athletes with more power and some athletes with less power. So the comparison between the athletes is also crucial for this kind of climate. So it's also about rivalries among the athletes, not only to other groups, but also within the own training group. And these coaches also want to control life outside sports. So they will want to have like perfect control over the athletes, and they will have all the power. So that's typical for an ego-oriented motivational climate. Very extreme, but again, as you might recognize, that's part of the coaching that I meant on my first slide, right? So that's what we see. The thing is, if we have this ego-oriented motivational climate, there's some studies on that. And we know that an ego-oriented motivational climate by the coach is first related to higher competitive anxiety by the athletes. So they will be afraid in front of a competition, because they will know there will be punishment from the coach if they fail. They have more concerns about their personal performance. These athletes, athletes who grow up in an ego-oriented motivational climate, they think that only ability is a very stable construct. I can't change my ability, or it's hard to change my ability to do something. That's important for performance, not my effort, which is very variable and which I control, but my ability. In an ego-oriented climate, you will have increased conflicts among athletes. You will have the athletes will perceive themselves more based on norms, not based on their own performance, but they relate more to the norms and more to others. And you will find lower levels of morality, and also low levels of social support from the coach. So if you ask athletes if they perceive a highly ego-oriented climate, they will also report low levels of social support, and also low levels of positive feedback from the coach. And lastly, and that's very important, I think, you will see higher dropout rates from the sports. So this is what happens when you do coaching, like we see it in gymnastics or in figure skating right now. On the other hand, when you look at the task-oriented motivational climate, first of all, if a coach is using a task-oriented motivational climate, it means that he or she is integrating athletes in the decision process. So let them decide their own stuff. It doesn't mean that athletes have to decide completely for themselves what they want to train, how long they want to train, which task they want to do, which exercises they want to practice. It's not meant that they need to have absolute power, but it's important that they feel, like their voice is being heard. And that's part of a task-oriented motivational climate. So these coaches who use a task-oriented motivational climate, they are communicating with the athletes as equals, kind of. So there's not a strong hierarchy or the power relation is more equal. Also, these coaches are giving equal recognition to all athletes. So they let everyone contribute their share. So every athlete is important. Also the one who's perhaps the bench player, or the one with the youngest one, or the one who's still learning. So these are also important people in that group. These coaches will compare performances only with the own prior performance. They're not so much comparing the athletes, not like telling a 13-year-old, look at the 11-year-old, she's already doing this, why can't you do this? So they're not doing this. They are comparing and saying, okay, look what you were able to do, what you were just able to do, and if you compare with last year, you improved, and that's great. So it's so improvement is important, and that's what they give praise for. And they recognize mistakes as parts of the learning process. Yeah, so effort and persistence are more important than the current objective performance. So they don't rate how is my actual performance, how did I perform in the last race or the last game, but they will more see the progress and they will see the effort that someone's putting in. And these coaches promote cooperation between athletes. So as you can see, this is the other extreme point of a motivational climate. That's a task-oriented motivational climate. And when we look at what research is saying about the effects of this task-oriented motivational climate, is that we can find, first of all, a stronger long-term performance motivation. So this is a kind of climate that will motivate athletes to perform. It will motivate them in the long term. And athletes growing up in a task-oriented motivational climate, they will have a realistic estimation of their own performance. So they know what they can do and know what they have to learn. They feel more competent. And they believe that their effort is crucial for success, not the stability part. So not the ability, but the effort is more important. These athletes will use useful coping strategies when they are in a stress situation. So they have a lower anxiety before competition. They have fun. They are more satisfied, and they show more positive emotions. And they also found a lower probability for burnout in these athletes. So as you can see, a lot of positive stuff. As I continue, they have a perception of high levels of social support from the coach. They feel positive peer relations, and there's more fairness and less aggression within the team. And there are also first studies who tell us that the subjective and also the objective performance in competition might be better in a task-oriented motivational climate. We still have to work on more studies on that, but it looks like a task-oriented motivational climate is a climate that can give people more motivation over long term, and also in the long term higher performance. And the thing is that in order to achieve these goals, and in order to work with the motivational climate, it's not necessary to completely block out the ego-oriented part, because we will have that in sport. We have the comparisons all the times. You will have the competitions, and that's okay. But it's important to know that within a group, you can have both. You can have an ego-oriented climate and also a task-oriented motivational climate. So it's possible, right? So within a group, you can have an exclusively ego-oriented motivational climate, exclusively task-oriented, both ego and task-oriented, or neither nor. So, and that's what I think it's important to note, because we don't have to tell the coaches, okay, you can't do competitions anymore. That's not what I'm saying. The thing is that the idea, I would say, is that we should try to reduce the ego-oriented coaching and enhance task-oriented coaching. So that's called a mastery orientation. If we work on enforcing a mastery orientation and try to implement a task-oriented motivational climate, that will lead to a stronger performance motivation and hopefully better performance in the long term. So this is the part the motivational climate is about, and that's the basis for the research we were doing. But there's one step more, because there was a recent development from the motivational climate, and that's incorporating another theory. And that theory, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's the so-called self-determination theory, in short SDT, by DC and Ryan. Also, as you can see, an older theory. And the interesting thing is that recently the two theories have been combined, but I will get to that later on. So first of all, just a very short glimpse at the self-determination theory. So basically, one part of the self-determination theory is the basic psychological needs theory. And it says that every person has three basic psychological needs. So every one of us has these needs. And the first need is the need for competence. So I want to have the feeling to be good in something or to make progress in the task that I'm doing. And you see this in little kids, because if you have little kids, they always will show you when they did something, and they want to get praise for that, and they want to feel good and want to feel competent. And so that's for me, that's a sign that this is based in all of us. So we all have this need. We want to feel competent in whatever we're doing. And the second need is the need for autonomy. I've already talked a bit about autonomy because it's also part of the task orientation. And the need for autonomy means that I want to have the feeling that I can decide for myself something, or to be included in decision. I don't want to decide like everything, and that's not important, but at least I want to feel like I have a decision, so I can say something about things that are important for me. And you can also see that in kids, because they also want to decide for themselves. If you put them out some clothing, if they're small, and they will say, no, I don't want to take this sweater, I want another one. And it's important for them to decide for themselves. So what you can do is give them 2 sweaters and say, okay, which one do you want? So it's an easy decision, but still they feel autonomous and they made the decision for themselves. Sometimes they will say, okay, I want another one. And then you have the problem again. But as you can see, it's important. I think that's important because it's a basic need. And we all have this need. If you can't decide freely, you see that with the whole COVID-19 protests that we have. It's just because people can't decide freely what they want to do anymore, and because government is coming with restrictions, which are necessary. But still, people they say, I want to decide for myself. And that's, it's in us. That's the point. Okay, and the third need that we have is the need for relatedness. So I want to be, so everyone wants to be part of a group. I want to have some peers. I want to be liked. I want to be included. So this is 3 very basic needs. And we are working with this theory for a very, very long time now. And I think when you really think about it, it's really in everything we do. So, and this is leading on motivation. So the idea is, and that's the link to motivation, the idea is if I'm in a situation where all these needs are satisfied, then the theory would say then the self-determination goes up. That's why the theory is called self-determination theory. And more self-determination means that I have a stronger intrinsic motivation. So these are the things that I do because I love doing it, because I have fun doing it. If my basic needs are satisfied, I will be more motivated. So, and the new development, what colleagues Duda and Appleton from the UK started in 2016 is that they said, okay, we would like to combine the 2 theories because they're kind of similar. So the achievement goal theory and the idea of a motivational climate and the idea of the self-determination theory. And they are talking about the empowering motivational climate. So they connect motivational climate with self-determination theory. And they say, similar to the motivational climate, is that we have on one hand a disempowering climate. And a disempowering climate is ego involving. So everything I told you about what an ego-oriented motivational climate is doing. And also very controlling. So athletes can't be free with their needs. On the other hand, an empowering climate will involve a task involving a motivational climate, which fulfills the need for competence. It will be autonomous supportive, which means that the need for autonomy is fulfilled, and it will be socially supportive, which means that my need for relatedness is fulfilled. So what they say is we have on one hand an empowering motivational climate and on the other hand a disempowering motivational climate. And the empowering climate consists of the 3 factors that I just presented you. And the disempowering climate consists of the 2 factors like ego involving climate and controlling climate. And what's happening if we, if a coach is using this kind of climate, if he's using an empowering motivational climate, this will lead to need satisfaction. So people will be satisfied, and that leads to intrinsic motivation. intrinsic performance motivation, and better performance in a later way. And if I'm working with the disempowering motivation climate, people will be thwarted in their needs, and this will lead to worse long-term motivation and worse performance. Also, we have some crossover effects here, but basically we would say that an empowering climate should be a way to improve motivation and performance of athletes. Okay, so now I talked a lot about the scientific theory on achievement motivation, and I told you this would be a problem solver against interpersonal violence in sport, because that's what we're talking about here. So yeah, how did I get to that? And the idea is that, I mean, I've been working in the psychology department of my university a lot, and I've been working on group processes. And yeah, when I started working on sexual violence, yeah, we realized that, or most of you will know that the risk factors for interpersonal violence in sport, among other risk factors, are unequal power relations, male dominance, and strong hierarchies. So these are elements of a disempowering motivational climate. And we also see that all forms of interpersonal violence have in common that the offenders demonstrate their power over others, which is also an element of a disempowering climate. And we also see a strong overlap between experiences of interpersonal violence. And I've brought, perhaps you've already seen this graph, I've brought a graph from our Safe Sports study that we did in Germany in 2016, where we ask for, in a group of elite athletes, we ask for their experiences of interpersonal violence. And when you look at that, you will see that only there's the little white, the little white area on the right side, 12% of the athletes, they told us there was no interpersonal violence in sport in their life, but all the other had experienced at least one form of interpersonal violence. And for 16%, it was all three forms of interpersonal violence that we had been measuring. So we have a large overlap. And the question that we started to ask there is, yeah, do we have a problem with the sport culture? Because when there's so much interpersonal violence, there must be a problem with the whole culture in sport. And this is why we started the project called Titre. It's a German project, and it went from 2019 to 2021. And we looked at the coaches as central persons in preventing interpersonal violence in sport. We did interviews and online surveys with coaches and athletes. And yeah, I will focus today on the results of the athlete survey, where we ask athletes about their interpersonal violence experiences. So we had psychological, physical, and sexual violence. Sorry, Sylvie, we didn't measure neglect. We should have, but we were not aware of that at that moment. Today I would change that, but yeah. So we just have the three parts, but at least we have them. And we also measured the empowering and disempowering climate within the group of athletes. So what did they experience within their training group? And we had more than 800 athletes in our sample. So most of them were female, but there was a very diverse sample from 58 kinds of sports, and also a high level of performance. So we had really 8% from the national team, and 63% from a lower national squad. So we have a kind of a hierarchical squad system in Germany, but still these are very high performance athletes. And what we saw in our study is, first of all, I will show you the basic prevalence rates of interpersonal violence. And we see that a lot of the athletes reported psychological violence. So that really fits with the Safe Sport data we had measured some years ago. We also had some people reporting sexual violence and also physical violence. So these data kind of match the data from other countries. But what we were interested was the combination to empowering and disempowering climate. So not just the basic prevalence rates. So the, the general ratings of the empowering and disempowering climate is when you look at the top 3 factors, that's the empowering climate, and the bottom 2 factors, that's the disempowering climate. And what you can see there is, first of all, that we had a scale from 1 to 5. So we found a fairly high empowering climate, which is good, I think, in general. So we can see that the coaches in Germany concentrate more on empowering climate than on disempowering climate, because there the values are considerably lower. But you can also see that there's a high range. So we have some coaches really doing a high controlling and high ego involving climate, and for some coaches it's very low, the ego involving climate. Yeah, and of course what was most interesting for us was the combination. So do we see any differences in empowering climate and disempowering climate when combining with the experiences of interpersonal violence? Yeah, I will try to explain the graph a bit, because that's a lot of data. So as you can see on the left side, we have the empowering climate, and on the right side, we have the disempowering climate. And the blue bars are the people who experienced at least one incident of psychological violence within sport in their life. And the gray bars, these are the people who did not report any psychological violence. So what we see, I start with the task involving climate. What we can see here, that people who said, yeah, there was at least one incident of psychological violence in my life, they reported lower values for the task involving climate as the ones who said, okay, there was no psychological violence. And we see the same pattern also for the autonomy supportive climate and also for the socially supportive climate. So what we can see is that the people who said, okay, there was no psychological violence, they were raised in a higher task-oriented climate. And on the other hand, when we look at the disempowering climate, is that the people with a psychological violence experience, they report higher bars. So their values are higher than the ones from the who said, okay, there was no psychological violence in my life. And that means that, yeah, they experience a more disempowering climate. So what I can say from this data is this is statistically significant. So I would say that this is at least the first idea that an empowering and also a disempowering climate is a factor when it comes to experience psychological violence. So a disempowering climate might be a risk factor, whereas an empowering climate might be a protectional factor for that. And we just had a look at the psychological violence, and when we look at the physical violence, you will see that's almost the same. It looks similar, the whole structure of our results. So, and that's, yeah, the reason is that we find the exact same effects. So again, also for physical violence as a dependent variable, we see that within an ego-oriented and disempowering climate, people will express more physical violence experiences than when they are raised in an empowering climate. And the same holds true for the sexual violence. So the same pattern. Interestingly, the only part where we don't see any differences between the two groups, so people experiences with experience and without sexual violence experience, we don't see any difference for the social support. So that doesn't make a difference when it comes to sexual violence. And yeah, I would like to discuss that with you afterwards if you have any ideas why this should be the case. But I think that's interesting. But again, especially the right side, the disempowering climate is interesting, I think, because there we can see that a disempowering climate is a risk factor for sexual violence as well. And lastly, we had a look at a very small subgroup, namely the people who reported, okay, there was an incident of sexual violence, by another athlete in my sport group. So not the coach as a perpetrator, but another athlete. And also when we look here, we see for the empowering climate, we don't see these any statistic effects, but again, for the disempowering climate. So if the coach is working with the disempowering climate, there's more sexual violence between the athlete. So there we can see the importance of the coach, not only for like sexual violence experience between coach and athlete, but also among the athletes. So I think that's important as well. So to conclude, what we found in our study is that we can say athletes with an interpersonal violence experience, they report lower values in empowering climate factor, they report higher values in disempowering climate factors compared to the athletes without this experience. And for interpersonal violence in general, we find that, but also for sexual violence by other athletes from their own training group. So there is something obviously with the coaching culture. We have to say that our effects are small, so we have to be a bit cautious with the interpretation, but we found the same results when we just did a study with in German gymnastics. So we had a sample of about 900 athletes from gymnastics and also from the recreational levels. So we had the national team down to recreational levels, and we find the same, exactly the same. So for me, my conclusion is that a higher empowering climate and a lower disempowering climate within the training group can be a protecting factor against interpersonal violence within the group. Okay, so now the question is, we know these effects, and that's fine. And so the question is, what can I do? How can I change my coaching style to an empowering motivational climate? And the interesting thing is that we don't have to invent anything, because it's also already there, because we have an intervention program called the Target program that was also invented several years ago. And it was created for physical education in schools in order to motivate people there. So motivate the students that they will take part in the physical education lessons and be motivated. And this intervention program is called the Target model. And it's an acronym. And the task is the letters are standing for words again. So the T is for task, the A is for autonomy, R is for recognition, G is for grouping, E is for evaluation, and T is for timing. So I will give you a short overview what's meant by these 6 parts of the Target model. So I would start with the task factor. So the idea of the task part is that I focus on when I working with different tasks, I should focus on what the athletes should learn during trainings and which abilities should be improved. So the idea is that I would try to promote intrinsic attractiveness of learning tasks. And I would like to show that learning and not being able to do something is a good process. So how can I do that? I can use individual challenges. So I work with athletes individually, not giving everyone the same task, but individual tasks for people with different goals. And I should also work with the athletes on their personal goal setting. So asking them, setting their own goals, and teaching them how to find realistic goals. Because when I start this, they will not have realistic goals, even younger athletes. They will always overestimate or underestimate themselves. But they have to be aware of their level of performance in order to be able to set realistic goals. And it's important to choose a moderate difficulty in tasks. So for everyone, like for the better athletes, I should work with other tasks than for the athletes who still have to improve. And as you can see, when we're working with these kinds of ideas, the related empowering factors are the task orientation. So I work on mastery goals, and also the need of competence will be fulfilled for every athlete when I use that. The next letter is the A for autonomy. In some books you will find authority, but I think the meaning is the same. the meaning is that that's the extent to which the coach decides, or to which extent the athlete is involved in decision making. So it's about freedom of choice and assumption of responsibility by the athletes. How can I do that? I can, first of all, include athletes in the decision-making process. And again, it's not about maximal autonomy. It's not about athletes have to decide for themselves. And of course, it's also age dependent. I cannot letting very young children decide everything, but they can decide something. My little nephew, he's 2 years old. He can decide if he wants to have his hot chocolate, like hot chocolate or cold chocolate. If I ask him, I will get an answer, and he will be happy about that. Basically, that he can decide. Sometimes he will tell me hot and cold, and I have to see, okay, what can I do about this? Then, yeah, but we find a solution then. But the basic thing is that, yeah, he has the feeling that he can make his own decisions. And I can start with very simple decisions, like in sport, letting the athletes decide what game we play at the end. Just 2 games, and they can decide the one thing or the others, or the order of exercises that we do in a lesson. I can include them in very basic decisions, so they know how to express their voice. And then also it's important to letting them taking leadership roles when they're getting older, so they can teach other athletes. They can profit from the progress of the others, and they can also they develop through their self management and self monitoring. So they learn this, and it's good that they learn this, because it fulfills their need for autonomy and also their need for competence. So 2 basic needs are fulfilled when I use more autonomy, when I trust myself that I can give away some power. I don't need to have all the power. I can trust my athletes that they will not be lazy and say, okay, I will go home now. I don't want to, when I can decide, I go home. I'm sure they won't. They will always, they want to go on. They want to make more. They want to, sometimes I really have to stop them, because I say, okay, no, let's not do more. But that's when they intrinsically motivated. They want to do more all the time. Okay, so the next part is recognition. I would say also acknowledgement a bit. It means that I should think about what will I recognize athletes for. And yeah, the idea is to reward or recognize the process or the improvement. And so the idea that every athlete should experience recognition for individual progress, and that new challenges are what I want to see. So how can I do that? Yeah, first of all, I should really work with every athlete and talk with every athlete. In Germany, we have some coaching examples for that. I don't know if Jürgen Klopp, he's a soccer coach or a football coach, if he's so familiar to you, but he's known for really talking to every athlete all the time. He has a big soccer team, but he's working with every athlete individually, and he's taking the time and talking to them. And I think that's a way for really letting everyone know, okay, I care as a coach. I know that's hard when you have a big group, but I think it's possible. Recognition means that I give personal feedback on the individual progress. Like I have individual meetings with the people. I will reward effort and progress, not the current state of performance. That I really see, okay, what do we have here? And then I set realistic goals and say, okay, we talk again in like 3 months or whatever. And then I can see, how can I evaluate your progress? And yeah, what's happening when I do this is that I fulfill the need of competence of my athlete. I fulfill the need for relatedness, because they feel related to me, and also as task oriented. So there are mastery goals, and that's, so it's like 3 factors of the empowering climate that are really used here. Okay, next one is the grouping. And what's meant by grouping is that I should create a productive learning atmosphere in groups. And really try to build up an environment where everyone is accepted and acknowledged. So the idea is also to promote soft skills, social skills among the athletes, especially things like empathy and taking care of each other. So perspective taking. It's important for young athletes to learn how to take care of each other. And then they can feel related if I do this, and everyone feels included. And that's good. If others try to understand if some athlete has a problem, then another athlete can go and help. So if I use different forms of group composition, I can different levels of performance. Sometimes I can mix athlete with their performance, and the better ones can help the others. Sometimes I will have other groups than when I just separate the ones that are doing better, but I should change it all the time. So have mixed groupings. But it's also, grouping means also the opportunity for social interaction, not only within training, but after training, and do some social stuff with them so they can be together as a group. And the idea is, of course, that the need for relatedness is also fulfilled, because if sport is an important element within their life, they want to feel related to their teammates, of course. But it's also an element that's supporting their need for competence, because if they coach the others, they feel competent. And then if the others get older, they can also coach the younger ones and feel competent again. So it's really a progress there. Okay, then we have evaluation, which means that I should set clear standards for the athletes and also clear rules for evaluating the learning process and the results. So it's important to define goals and standards and also to pursue them consistently. And that's the hardest part, actually. I mean, the ones of you who have children, they know how hard it is to enforce the rules that I've once set, but it's important. And it's important for the athletes as well. So in a way, working with athletes, it's not different than raising children, actually, because it's the same process in some ways. So what I mean is, and what I mean by the evaluation part is that I should set rules and values, and they should be communicated, and they could also be invented within the group. So there should be some rules within the group that we can discuss together, and letting them part in, the athletes really take part in inventing these rules. And these rules should be equal for everyone, including me as a coach. Yeah, so if I have exceptions, I should explain them. So everyone can have the feeling that it's fair, because it's always when I have rules that only account for some of the group, some people in the group, they will say, okay, why do I have to care about the rules when the others don't? And it's also about encouraging self-evaluation. It's also about establishing equal reward and penalty conditions for everyone. So it's also about transparency. And lastly, as I said, it's also regular checking on these rules and taking care that everyone follows the rules, because that's important as well. If I set rules and I don't take care of these rules, they don't have any sense. No. So the related empowering factor here is mostly the task-oriented motivational climate. And the last factor of the target model is timing. And it's related to the planning and timing of tasks. And the idea is that, there should be opportunities for extensive and meaningful engagement in learning tasks for everyone. So everyone should have individual timing, because everyone has individual needs. And I will have athletes who will learn faster, and I will have athletes who learn slower. So I should consider these different learning paces in general, and not just saying, okay, you have 10 minutes time for this exercise, and afterwards you should be finished. But then it will be helpful for some of them, but for others it won't. But timing also means that athletes should learn to organize their personal goals realistically. So also in order of timing. So when is it realistic to be faster by 1 second on 10 meters within 2 weeks? No, it's not. But they should learn how long does it take for me to pursue this goal. And timing also means that I should spend an equal amount of time with every athlete. Yeah, so that every athlete will, have the idea that I see him or her. So it's a bit overlapping with other factors here. But I also should support athletes in improving their training and organizing their training plans, because that's also an important thing for young athletes. They have to learn to get their own structure and set their own goals, but also organize their training plan. If I say, okay, you have to work on getting faster, I should first tell them how can they do it and when can they do it, so they can learn how to do it for themselves next time. And we have here we have 3 factors of the empowering climate that are fulfilled. So the need for competence, the need for autonomy, and also the task orientation. So this is a very important factor as well. Yeah, so to summarize, that was the target model. And to summarize what I told you today is that I would conclude that incidences of interpersonal violence in sport are often facilitated by unequal power relations and hierarchies. And I would say that the empowering climate is a possible tool for reducing these hierarchies and unequal power relations. And at the same time, and that's what I find most interesting, I will support the motivation. So it's not, as the other coaches say, I would need to yell at them in order to motivate them. No, it's not, because what we know from achievement goal theory is that they will not be motivated more. So, but rather they will be motivated more when I use an empowering climate. And it's also a protective factor. And we have first scientific data that supports our assumption. But of course, we will need more studies because we had small effect sizes. But yeah, the advantage of the construct I see is that we have a scientific theory as a basis, and we have, on the other hand, intervention ideas that already exist, so we can try them. And I would encourage you to try that and see what's happening. The problem we have is that the coaches must be willing to do this, because they have to let go some of their power, some of their, they have to give away some power. It doesn't work the other way around. Like, and more communication is really needed. And for some coaches, this is already seen as a weakness. So that would be the next idea. How can we get coaches to try these new ideas? But yeah, that's my question to you. Perhaps you have some ideas, but I would say that empowering climate is a promising element when preventing interpersonal violence. So I think we should try it and use it, and then see if it's really as strong as we think. And I think it is, and hope we can really show the coaches that it's better if they use this kind of climate. So that's from my side. Thanks for listening. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thanks for sharing your knowledge on how coaches can foster a positive climate for athletes. It was very, very enlightening. So now if we're ready to begin the Q&A session. So if you have any question, please raise your hand.
There is a question in the chat, Elizabeth, from Tina.
Oh, I don't have it.
I don't see it either, actually. So
I think they asked their question directly to me.
Okay.
Maybe Tina, will you want to ask your question directly by opening your camera?
Yeah, sure. I was just checking. That's why I sent it to the chair only, because I missed part of your sample description, Jeannine. Hello, Jeannine.
Hi, Tina.
I was wondering whether you expect differences between types of sport, individual sports versus team sports, but I wasn't sure that your first sample was also only in gymnastics. I missed that, so apologies if you said that already. Because I remember that the coach-athlete relationship is depending on the type of sport, of course.
Yes, you're right. I think it's harder to realize in team sports, but the data we have that I presented there, it was really from different sports. So we have one study that we just had in gymnastics, where we see the same, where we had gymnasts from all kind of performance levels. And then we had the other study with multi-sports, but then more on the elite level. But we find exactly the same results there. So in both studies. So I would say it's easier to invent an empowering climate within individual sports, because normally your training groups are smaller and you already have a more personal contact with the athletes. But on the other hand, I think these are the kinds of sports where we mostly see the disempowering climate. So there's more. We have to talk to the coaches more in order to make them see that it's important to have the empowering climate, and to start with that. But I think the effect should be the same in both kinds of sports.
Okay, interesting. So if you do your analysis again and you split your sample of the first study in two, individual versus team sports, you don't expect any differences in the effect size.
And we didn't do that yet. I can do it and I'll let you know what if we found something unexpected. But actually, I wouldn't expect that, because we also had some sport organizations that helped us with the study. So the Basketball Federation and also the Gymnastic Federation, and we had we gave them individual results. And what we saw is that we didn't find any difference in the total level for empowering climate and disempowering climate. So we didn't find more disempowering climate in gymnastics than in basketball, or what else had we in there, handball. So that's why I would expect that also the differences between the two groups should be similar.
Very interesting. Thank you.
But I will calculate it and let you know.
Let me know. Thanks.
So we have a question in the chat. Cleo was asking, I was wondering whether it is only the coach who construct an empowering or disempowering climate, or whether other stakeholders, club board members, or contribute as well.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think that's a really important question, because I was talking about the coach because that's the person who's very close to the athlete, and of course the person who's really mostly responsible for the climate within the group. But also the coaches are part of the whole sports system, and there's a whole lot of pressure on the coaches as well. I mean, there's a reason why they're doing their disempowering coaching, because they get pressure from the administrative personnel and board members, and everyone says, okay, we want to get medals from you, and of course then they will put on with the pressure. And what's happening is that if you're stressed, you will work differently with people, and you're not that friendly anymore, and you really start working with the disempowering climate just because you get pressure from the outside as well. And also the athletes. I mean, we should not forget the parents. Parents are very important here. And if I'm growing up in a family where there's a disempowering climate within the family, because I can have that as well. So the children are used that they can't have a voice, that they really they have to do what their parents say, and they are really used to that. And then they have a coach using an empowering climate. They're like, okay, what's happening here? I'm not used to that, and I'm not used to making my own decisions. And so it's also a progress that I have to get the athletes in there, even the athletes who are not used to being in an empowering climate. But of course, it's the whole surrounding that really, factors in that.
Thank you for your answer. Stephanie, do you have a question? Yes. Oh, no. Okay. I thought you opened your camera for that.
Oh, no, I was
okay. Sorry.
But I could maybe add to I found the question very interesting, and I'm from community psychology, so I found empowerment and empowerment theories are really big in our field. And I was just wondering, so it's more of a question / idea for a next study, but there's also everything about the empowering or disempowering settings and community organizations that could be constructed as clubs or associations. Maybe that could be an interesting idea to measure to explain the coach's behavior also, and see if because I find, and I deeply appreciate your thoughts and presentation. I find they're very interesting strategies, but I think that if we don't take into consideration the organization, it might be very difficult for the coach to put in place those strategies if they're not coherent with the philosophy of the association.
Yes, I totally agree with you. It's as a coach, I mean, I can do this when I really work with small children in a small club, that might be fine. But if I'm really in a high performance setting and I say, okay, I will now invent an empowering climate, I will say like, what are you doing? And if you don't get the success very fast, you will be out. And that's why I totally agree. We have to really work on this whole system and the whole organization, that they will recognize that this is important.
Sylvie?
I'm just curious about, what do you think where we should go after that? So in terms of research, but also in terms of interventions. So do you think with the conclusions that you have for the moment, that a training for coaches to prevent interpersonal violence could have this component of empowering, disempowering? But what do you think other things we have to do in that kind of big picture for a training? Do we need also other things? Because I saw for sexual violence, it's not that clear that have an impact. So what are, in your mind, a perfect combination of training for coaches?
Yeah, thank you. That's a big question, actually.
Yeah.
First of all, I think it would be helpful to have longitudinal studies to see that what happens when we have athletes for 1 year within an empowering climate and athletes for 1 year in a disempowering climate, and see if we can find for this specified period of time, we can really see differences in experiences of interpersonal violence. Then we have a more causal relationship, which we don't have here yet. That's why I would be still very cautious with scientific with the results, because I would say it's preliminary results. But still, we have to keep in mind that these results are in line with what we have heard from interviews with survivors of interpersonal violence. They will all tell us that they didn't have any power, that they didn't have any saying, that they it's always about power relations when you talk to them. So that's why I think the empowering climate is a very promising approach. And this is also why one of my next steps would be to really look and see if the target intervention is working, that we try this, that we work with coaches, that we really support them, and we can work with the sports psychologists. They can support us here, because if we have sports psychologists working with the coaches and really telling them at what points their empowering climate is not working yet, so the coaches can improve, and then we can see if this will have any effects on that. So we can really use a scientific evaluation of the intervention, and then we can say, okay, this is really working. So this will have an effect. But still, when I work with coaches, and I'm doing sometimes I'm doing workshops on interpersonal violence or prevention of sexual violence, and we had some with the Gymnastics Federation where we worked with the coaches, but also from other sports. And I always talk, at least shortly, about the empowering climate to give to get the idea in their heads. Because from my side, what's the disadvantage of trying this? I mean, it will motivate. We know that it will motivate. We know this from studies. So this is what we know for a fact. And we have the idea that it might also help against interpersonal violence. So I can't lose anything if I try this. I just have to change my mindset and let go of the idea that I need to have all the power.
Thank you. We have two other questions in the chat. So the first one is along the lines of Stephanie's question. Do you have examples or know of any practices wherein policy, funding, and reward structures are aligned with empowering climates?
Unfortunately, not in Germany. There's a big discussion on that. If the the whole system of how elite sport in Germany is financed or structured, if this is good. And we have Athleten Deutschland, they are there is a voice of the athletes on the really political level, and they are doing really a lot at the moment. They are really a strong voice in favor of a center for safe sport, where we can really have a research but also intervention center for everything that's connected to safe sport, as we have in USA, Canada, and other countries already. But we don't have that in Germany, and we need that. So they are really talking more and more about how can elite sport be more human. So I think we have to go there, but it's really a progress, and we're perhaps at 1% at the moment, and we have to go. And so now, sorry, I don't have any good examples for that. Perhaps in some years we will have.
Thank you. The other question is, did you find a difference in your results between a male versus female coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, we haven't analyzed that. If female coaches are using more empowering climate and less disempowering climate, I don't know yet. I will have a look at that as well. But interestingly, what we see, the examples from the press that we have, that's always female coaches where we had the problem with the disempowering climate. I mean, just with the same with the Russian example right now.
Good, thank you. Olivier?
Hello, everyone. Hello to my fellow colleagues in Quebec. Thank you for this great presentation. Unfortunately, I missed a little bit because I had to pick up a phone call, but one of the thing, I'm from water polo, so it's a physical sport, as you know. And we've noticed that in some clubs, we have role models, right? Like high profile athletes and I find that is more on the ego part of your system. And a lot of young kids relate to them. And we find a lot of negative role models. And sometimes we have a problem in managing that, knowing that they transmit such negative values when they could, do a great job as a positive job. So do you have any ways to mitigate that, or to put the emphasis on those role model in your proposition?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's a tough question. How do I get people, the athletes, really? Yeah, and the problem we have when we're working with the groups is that it's always the people who are standing out, they will be the leaders of the group. And if I want to change something within a group, I have to work with the leaders, of course. So if I don't get them, I won't get the group. And as you just said, you won't get the kids lower down, because they will always look up to them. We just started a project where we want to work on this, because we want to invent workshops for whole groups of athletes on how to get them an idea about their voice. But basically we also want to work with the leaders of the group, so with the athlete group, and see what can we do especially with them in order to change the climate within the group, because it's also motivational climate, but it's peer related and not from the coach. And of course the group can have their own climate independent of the coach. And I think that's a problem you have there, that the climate within the group is very ego oriented. But we are not that far into the project. We just started at the beginning of January. So at the moment, I would say it's important to get the leaders into a workshop and tell them about their own benefit of a difference in the climate, and tell them about the ideas how to work together and change the rules within the group, work with them on rules, and how can we take care of each other. A colleague of mine, Christian, he is working with young soccer players, and they are not very empathetic, because they are really raised in a system where they have to be strong and they have to be superior, and they don't care about other people. And he really took them and went a home of migrant people with migration background, where they just like refugees, they just came to our country, and then they worked together and talked, and then they to let them know that there's also another world apart from sports, and let them see this world, and let them try some empathy. So it's important to work on the social skills here as well, I think. But for me, that's a totally different approach. Work with the athletes and then work with the coaches.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's not really a solution, but perhaps
I like to ask those questions, to just get the ball rolling.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question? No. So Sylvie, would you like to conclude this webinar?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Jeannine. It was so interesting, enlightful, and also very useful research that you do. So it's very applied. So I hope we can work as soon as possible with each other one time to see how we can set up, for example, kind of training for our coaches, and how it can be adapted in countries, in different countries. So I hope you will pursue in that way and inform us of your research. So congratulations and thank you very much. I also want to take the opportunity today to say that we will have another webinar that it will coming soon. So it will be March 31st, and it will be with Dr. Camilla Knight. So she will present on the role of parents in safeguarding young athletes, or to prevent violence and abuse against children. So she will be there with us on March 31st. So we welcome you. We will have more details as soon as possible to transfer to you on that. So if there is no other question, I thank you very much. And thank you for all the people that were present today.